Welcome to This Explainer. Right, so today we are unpacking a moment that literally upended international AI governance. And the crazy part? It all went down in a matter of days. We're looking at a stunning case study of how the US government took a decades-old trade tool and used it to instantly paralyze one of the most advanced artificial intelligence models on the entire planet. So buckle up, because the story of the Mythos Directive is an absolute roller coaster.
72. That is the exact number of hours that Anthropic's Claude Fable 5 model was actually available to the public before the US government completely pulled the plug. And we're not just talking about shutting it down in America, this was global. It's wild to think about. An incredibly sophisticated piece of technology shut down worldwide practically overnight.
Section 1, the 3-day AI shutdown, a global AI blackout. Let's get right into exactly how this happened.
To really grasp how fast all of this moved, we've got to look at the timeline. So, back in April of 2026, Anthropic granted restricted access to their highly capable Mythos 5 model to a few select companies and federal agencies, just for evaluation. Then, on June 9th, they launched a more broadly available variant, Claude Fable 5, alongside Mythos 5 for the general public. But then, boom, just 3 days later, on June 12th, the Commerce Department, specifically driven by the Bureau of Industry and Security, steps in and drops this massive emergency export control directive.
And what's truly unprecedented here is the sheer scope of this directive. The US government ordered the suspension of all access to these models by any foreign national. It didn't matter if you were sitting in a cafe in Europe or standing right inside US borders. Incredibly, and this is the part that really gets me, this mandate didn't just lock out foreign customers. It actually forced Anthropic to suspend access for its own foreign national employees. The very engineers who helped build the models were suddenly banned from using them. Unbelievable, right? Moving on to Section 2, Jailbreaks and Safety Architectures, Finding the Vulnerability. So why the extreme reaction? Well, the government was absolutely terrified of something called jailbreaking. If you're not familiar, jailbreaking is a prompt-based technique where users basically trick an AI model into bypassing its built-in safety guardrails. When Fable 5 launched, it shipped with strict guardrails explicitly barring it from identifying and exploiting software vulnerabilities. But the government believed they had found a jailbreak, a way to basically force the model to perform those restricted, highly dangerous cybersecurity actions anyway. The absolutely crucial point here is that the government's concern wasn't just about the model's abstract capabilities. It was about the dangerous gap between intended boundaries, what the AI company hopes the model will safely do, and the actual boundaries under adversarial use. Basically, what happens when someone is actively trying to break it. The government realized that Fable 5's safety architecture had a serious vulnerability, and they were absolutely not willing to let foreign nationals or adversarial actors test that gap out in the wild. Which brings us to Section 3, Redefining Software Exports, the Mythos Directive.
Okay, so under traditional export control, we regulate physical goods. Think of shipping military hardware or maybe downloading software on a CD-ROM and physically carrying it across a border. But the Mythos Directive completely rewrote the playbook. I mean, Fable 5 wasn't being downloaded. It lived entirely on Anthropic servers in the US. So the government decided that just sending a cloud API ping to a US server, if you happen to be a foreign national, counted as an export. They radically and almost instantly redefined what it actually means to export software. To justify this legally, the Commerce Department leaned heavily on a mechanism known as deemed exports. This is basically the legal principle that if you give a foreign national access to controlled technology, even if they are physically standing inside the United States, it legally constitutes an export to that person's home country. By applying this logic to API access, the government effectively locked out the entire world. And this created a massive, totally unsolvable dilemma for Anthropic. The government demanded the absolute exclusion of all foreign nationals. But look at consumer AI products today. They simply aren't built with the infrastructure to instantly verify the legal nationality of every single user pinging their servers in real time. It's just not possible. Because partial compliance was technically impossible, Anthropic was backed into a corner. The cascade of failure left them with literally only one option: a total global shutdown of the AI model for everyone.
Section 4, the policy whiplash. From voluntary to mandatory. Now we have to look at the chaotic policy landscape surrounding all this. Talk about institutional whiplash. On May 21st, President Trump canceled a mandatory pre-release AI review executive order, basically saying he didn't want to get in the way of America's lead in AI. Then, on June 2nd, he signs a revised CARET approach, a purely voluntary 30-day review for AI companies. So, Anthropic launches on June 9th without going through this voluntary review. And then, whiplash. Just 3 days later, the Commerce Department drops the stick, a mandatory export control directive that completely bypassed the voluntary framework altogether. This intense internal government tension is perfectly summarized by a quote from Kirsten Davis, the Department of Defense Chief Information Officer. She said, "Some things are simply more important than revenue cycles, clickbait, and pre-IPO valuation. America first, always." Wow. It's really important to note that this represents a very specific, security-focused faction within the administration, completely overriding industry concerns. And that mention of pre-IPO valuation, that's a direct, highly targeted reference to reports of Anthropic's mid-IPO status at the time. When push came to shove, the security imperatives unequivocally won out over the business ones. Finally, Section 5, the global AI fallout, collateral damage and future laws. The immediate aftermath of this was staggering collateral damage. It brought everyday innovation to a screeching halt. Allied foreign governments, who had actually been granted early access back in April to test their own cybersecurity, lost their integration with the AI instantly and without warning. Meanwhile, US AI labs were thrown into full-blown crisis mode, entirely unsure how to manage their highly skilled foreign national engineers, the people who literally build these models. But maybe most importantly, export controls emerged as the de facto, fast, unilateral enforcement tool for AI governance. It completely bypassed proposed slower-moving legislative frameworks like the Great American AI Act. Which leaves all of us with this final, really profound question. If an AI model's safety and adversarial robustness against jailbreaks can only truly be proven by testing it in the real world, but the government now deems the real world too dangerous for that testing, how does the next frontier AI ever launch? It's an impossible standard, and honestly, a fascinating paradox that is going to define the next era of technology. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.